You know that anxiety you feel on a first date? The sweating palms, the awkward conversation, the wondering if they like you? Yeah, imagine skipping all that and going straight to, "We're getting married in 3 weeks." Let me paint you a picture. It's 1885. You're a 19-year-old woman sitting in your parents' parlor wearing your best dress, which is uncomfortable and makes it hard to breathe. Across from you sits a 24-year-old man you've never met before. He's sweating, you're sweating, both sets of parents are watching like hawks. Your father and his father are discussing land boundaries. Your mother and his mother are discussing china patterns. Nobody has asked you anything. The man, your future husband apparently, looks at you exactly twice. Once when you entered the room, once when his mother elbowed him and told him to stop staring at his shoes. After 45 minutes of excruciating small talk between the parents, his father stands up and shakes your father's hand. "We'll announce the engagement next Sunday."
And just like that, your entire life is decided. You'll marry this stranger, sleep with this stranger, have children with this stranger, grow old with this stranger. Or maybe not a stranger. Maybe it's your cousin. That was also pretty common. Welcome to arranged marriage, the system that controlled human pair bonding for most of recorded history, where love was a nice bonus, but never the point, where your feelings about the person you'd spend your entire life with mattered less than property rights, family alliances, and keeping wealth in the right hands. This isn't a story about some distant, exotic culture. This is about your great-great-grandparents, about how people in America, Europe, everywhere used to form families, about a system so pervasive that romantic love, the thing we now consider essential to marriage, was actually seen as dangerous, irrational, and kinda stupid. But here's what nobody tells you about arranged marriages. They didn't just control who you married, they controlled how you thought about love, desire, autonomy, and what you deserved from life. This is where things take a turn. Here's what you need to understand. For most of human history, marriage wasn't about feelings. It was about survival. You'd think people would want their children to marry someone they loved, right? Someone who made them happy. But happiness was a luxury. Survival was essential. In agricultural societies, which is what most societies were until very recently, marriage was an economic arrangement, two families merging resources, land, livestock, labor, connections. Your daughter marrying the neighbor's son meant your farms could support each other during bad harvests. Your families could pool resources. Your grandchildren would inherit both properties. Love, that was something that might develop over time, or it might not. Either way, it was irrelevant to the primary function of marriage. And it wasn't just farmers. Wealthy families used arranged marriages to consolidate power and wealth. Your son marries the merchant's daughter, you get access to trade routes. Your daughter marries into the aristocratic family, you get social status and political influence. Poor families used arranged marriages to ensure their children didn't starve. Your daughter marries the blacksmith's son, she'll have a trade and security. Your son marries the widow with a small farm, he'll have land and purpose. Everyone had reasons, practical, logical, survival-based reasons, except the people actually getting married. The matchmaking systems were elaborate, especially in wealthier families. Professional matchmakers, usually older women, would maintain networks of eligible young people. They'd know who had land, who had debts, who had health problems, who had a good dowry, who was likely to produce healthy children. Parents would consult matchmakers like you'd consult a financial advisor today. My daughter is 16, decent dowry, good health, pleasant personality, who's available? The matchmaker would run through her mental database. The Cooper boy just turned 20, inherited his father's workshop, needs a wife who can manage household accounts. The Schmidt boy is 18, family owns 3 farms, but I should mention his mother is difficult. Negotiations would begin, not between the young people, between the families, dowry amounts, property transfers, living arrangements. Who pays for what happens if one of them dies, what happens if they can't have children.
By the time the couple actually met, most of the important decisions were already made. And here's something that'll mess with you. This system worked. For its intended purpose, it absolutely worked. Families maintained wealth, property stayed consolidated, social structures remained stable, resources got allocated efficiently. The system worked great, unless you were one of the people in the marriage. Let's talk about what happened after the wedding for a minute. Because the arrangement was one thing, living with the consequences was another. In many arranged marriages, the couple barely knew each other on their wedding day. Maybe they'd met once or twice during the negotiation period. Maybe they'd exchanged a few supervised conversations. Maybe they'd never spoken at all. And then suddenly they're supposed to be intimate, build a life together, have children together. Some couples got lucky. They discovered they actually liked each other. Affection developed. Companionship grew. They built genuine partnerships. But many didn't get lucky. You're 19, married to a man you've met 3 times. He's not cruel, not kind, just there. A stranger you're legally bound to. He has expectations, sexual, domestic, social, that you're supposed to fulfill regardless of how you feel about him. Or you're 22, married to a woman your parents chose because her family owned land adjacent to yours. She's fine, perfectly pleasant. You'll spend the next 50 years together feeling nothing. The emotional reality of arranged marriages varied wildly. Some people found contentment, if not passion. Some found deep affection over time. Some found quiet resignation. And some found misery. Because here's the thing about arranged marriages. Divorce was essentially impossible. In most Western societies until the late 1800s, you couldn't just leave a marriage because you were unhappy. You needed legal grounds. Adultery, abandonment, extreme cruelty. We don't like each other wasn't enough. You were stuck, forever, with this person your parents chose when you were too young to have any say. If your spouse turned out to be abusive, you'd probably stay anyway. Your family wouldn't support you leaving. They'd invested too much in the arrangement. Society wouldn't support you leaving. Marriage was sacred and permanent. The law wouldn't support you leaving. You had no legal grounds. If you developed feelings for someone else, too bad. Adultery was scandalous, sometimes criminal, and would destroy your reputation and possibly your life. If you just didn't love them, well, love wasn't the point, remember? You'd learn to live with it. The psychological toll of the system was enormous, but rarely discussed. You weren't supposed to complain. Marriage was duty, not fulfillment. Your feelings were secondary to family obligation, social expectation, and economic necessity. People developed coping mechanisms, emotional distance, separate lives under the same roof, affairs conducted quietly, pouring all affection into children instead of spouses, finding meaning in work, religion, friendships, anything but the marriage itself. And maybe that's the real horror here. Not that some arranged marriages were terrible, but that many were just empty. 2 people living parallel lives, fulfilling social and economic functions, never really knowing each other, never really connecting, just existing together until death. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Here's what rarely gets acknowledged about arranged marriages. They weren't just about controlling who married whom. They were about controlling everything else, too. Female sexuality, primarily. In most arranged marriage systems, women's virginity before marriage was essential, not because of morality, really, because of property. If you married off your daughter and she wasn't a virgin, her husband's family could claim fraud. They could demand the dowry back. They could annul the marriage. Your family would be humiliated, your daughter unmarriageable, your reputation destroyed. So families controlled daughters intensely, chaperoned constantly, kept away from young men, monitored, restricted, surveilled. Not for their own good, for the family's economic interests. Women who lost virginity before marriage, whether through choice or force, were often considered ruined, unmarriageable, their economic and social value destroyed by one sexual encounter. This wasn't about religion or morality, not really.
This was about ensuring paternity. If a woman was a virgin at marriage, her husband could be reasonably certain her children were his. Those children would inherit his property, carry on his name, perpetuate his lineage. Female virginity was a property guarantee. Male virginity? Nobody cared. Men could have premarital sex, even children out of wedlock, with minimal social consequences, because men's property didn't depend on their sexual purity. The double standard was baked into the system. And then there was the issue of compatibility, or rather the complete disregard for it. Arranged marriages didn't consider personality, interests, values, life goals, or anything we'd now consider essential to a successful partnership. They considered money, land, status, and breeding potential. You could be an artistic, introverted woman who loved reading and hated social events. Your parents might marry you to a gregarious businessman who hosted parties constantly and thought books were a waste of time. You could be a gentle, thoughtful man who wanted a quiet life. Your parents might marry you to a social climber who needed a husband with ambition and connections. Nobody asked if you'd actually like each other, if you'd be able to have conversations, if you'd enjoy spending time together. The assumption was that compatibility didn't matter. You'd adapt, you'd learn to coexist. Your personal preferences were subordinate to family needs. This is where the psychology gets really dark. Because arranged marriage culture taught people that their desires didn't matter, that their feelings were irrelevant, that duty, obligation, and family came before individual happiness. You learned from childhood not to even imagine marrying someone you chose, not to develop romantic fantasies about future partners, not to think of marriage as something that should make you happy. You learned to want what you were supposed to want, to accept what was decided for you, to make peace with powerlessness. And that learned helplessness didn't stay confined to marriage. It spread to everything else: your career choices, your friendships, your living situation, your entire life. You weren't taught to make decisions based on what you wanted. You were taught to accept what others decided for you. Arranged marriage culture created people who didn't know how to choose, didn't believe they deserved to choose, and didn't even imagine choice was possible. The death of arranged marriage in Western culture was slower than you'd think. Romantic love as the basis for marriage started becoming culturally acceptable in the late 1700s and early 1800s. The Romantic movement in literature and art celebrated passionate love, individual choice, emotional connection. But cultural acceptance didn't mean immediate practice. Wealthy families continued arranging strategic marriages well into the 1900s. Working-class families continued expecting parental approval, if not direct arrangement. What actually killed arranged marriage was economic independence, particularly for women. As long as women couldn't own property, couldn't work most jobs, couldn't support themselves financially, they needed marriage for survival. And if marriage was necessary for survival, parents could control who they married. But in the late 1800s and early 1900s, things started changing. Women gained property rights, job opportunities expanded, education became more accessible. Slowly, gradually, women gained the ability to survive without a husband, which meant they could choose not to marry someone they didn't want. And once women could choose, they chose based on love. Men had always had more economic freedom, but social pressure to marry appropriately still constrained them. As social mobility increased, as class structures loosened, as individual achievement became more valued than family pedigree, men also started marrying for love rather than alliance. By the mid-1900s in America and Western Europe, arranged marriage was mostly dead. Romantic love had won. We got what we wanted: the freedom to choose our partners, the ability to marry for love, passion, connection, the autonomy to reject arrangements that didn't feel right. But we also inherited new problems. With choice came anxiety. How do you know if you've chosen right? What if there's someone better out there? What if the love fades? With love-based marriage came higher expectations. Marriage was supposed to fulfill you emotionally, sexually, intellectually, spiritually. Your spouse was supposed to be your best friend, perfect lover, ideal companion, and co-parent. One person had to be everything. Arranged marriages had low expectations. You weren't supposed to be in love. You were supposed to coexist peacefully and fulfill social roles. If you developed affection, great. If not, you still had a functioning marriage. Love-based marriages have impossibly high expectations. Your marriage is supposed to make you happy. If it doesn't, something's wrong. If the passion fades, the relationship is failing. If you're not fulfilled, you should leave. And divorce became easy, which is good. People can escape abusive or incompatible marriages, but it also means marriages end when they're just difficult, when they're going through rough patches, when they require work. Arranged marriage culture pressured you to stay and make it work because leaving wasn't an option. Love-based marriage culture tells you to leave if you're not happy because you deserve better. Neither system is perfect. One trapped people in marriages they never chose. The other creates impossible expectations and instability. One prioritized family and social stability over individual happiness. The other prioritizes individual happiness over everything else, sometimes at the cost of family and social stability. We're 3 or 4 generations into this experiment with love-based marriage, and we're still figuring out if it actually works better. Divorce rates are high. Many people never marry at all. Others marry multiple times, searching for the perfect partnership that might not exist. Dating apps let you shop for partners, swiping through hundreds of options, always wondering if someone better is one swipe away. It's the opposite of arranged marriage, infinite choice instead of no choice, but it creates its own kind of paralysis. We wanted freedom. We got it, but freedom is fucking hard. Arranged marriages took the choice away, which was oppressive, but they also took the anxiety away. Your path was clear, your role was defined. You didn't have to wonder if you made the right choice because you didn't make a choice at all. Now, you're supposed to find your soulmate among 8 billion people, choose them freely, build a perfect partnership, stay in love forever, and if it doesn't work out, it's somehow your fault for choosing wrong. And maybe that's the real story here, not just about arranged marriages or romantic love or how we choose partners, but about what happens when we swap one form of control for another. Arranged marriages controlled you externally. Your parents, your community, your culture decided your fate. Love-based marriage culture controls you internally. You're supposed to want the right things, feel the right feelings, make the right choices. And if you don't, if you're not happy, if the love dies, if you chose wrong, that's on you. Neither system trusts you to figure out your own life. One doesn't let you try, the other demands you succeed. Those couples sitting in parlors in 1885, meeting their future spouses for the first time, had no choice but also no responsibility. Their lives were predetermined, which was oppressive, but they couldn't be blamed for outcomes they didn't choose. You, swiping through dating apps in 2026, have infinite choice and infinite responsibility. Your life is self-determined, which is freedom, but you can be blamed for every outcome because you chose it. I'm not saying we should go back. Arranged marriages genuinely harmed people, especially women. The lack of autonomy, the forced intimacy, the trapped feeling, all real, all bad. But maybe we should acknowledge what we lost. We lost the certainty, the clear expectations, the family investment in making your marriage work because they chose it, the social support for marriages that weren't perfect because no marriage was supposed to be perfect. We lost the idea that marriage is work, not magic, that commitment matters more than passion, that sometimes the right choice is the one you make work, not the one that feels right at first. The next time you're on your 5th dating app, swiping through identical profiles, wondering why you can't find anyone, the next time you're questioning whether your partner is the one or if you should keep looking, the next time you're paralyzed by choice, overwhelmed by options, exhausted by the endless search for perfect love, remember there used to be a system where you didn't have to choose, where the decision was made for you, where you learned to build love instead of finding it.
It was oppressive, controlling, often terrible, but at least people knew what they were supposed to do. Now we're all just guessing. That's not just history, that's us still trying to figure out if freedom was worth it. If this made you question everything you thought about love, choice, and whether having options is actually better than having none, stick around, because there are 1,000 more stories like this, systems we abandoned that maybe solved problems we forgot we had.